I'll be speaking with Lenni Brenner. He's author of Zionism in the Age of the Dictators, other books, and he's edited a number of books. He's been an activist and a writer for many years. How are you, Lenni?
Well, for 81 years old, I feel like a puppy.
All right. So you've been watching the news about Saudi Arabia these weeks?
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, what's incredible about it is that the Khashoggi murder has been the front page of the New York Times practically every day from October 2, which was when it happened, until now. You know, I mean, so and I catch it on TV, on all kinds of news shows here in New Haven. So I think the big thing that's really happened is that as far as educated people are concerned, Saudi Arabia is now a hot button issue and is going to remain that way. One of the things that makes it so is the fact that Khashoggi was a Washington Post journalist. I mean, he literally, wrote regular articles for the Washington Post. Now, what that means in real life is that the Washington Post is going to talk about it every single day and make sure that it doesn't go away. It doesn't drift off to even page 2. The fact that he was a journalist, and they're portraying him as he was a journalist, and the Saudis killed a journalist writing for the Washington Post, means that all the other major American newspapers are covering it as they killed a journalist. And as of now, I would say that of the major newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal. Now, I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal every day. I would say that they are unanimous in believing that the prince organized the murder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the CIA evidently made such a report.
Exactly. In fact, what the New York Times keeps emphasizing every day is that every day the major American diplomats, the State Department, the CIA, that they all say he did it. And I think today's New York Times wrote that there's only one voice in Washington who doesn't denounce him as a murderer, and that's guess who?
Yeah.
So,
well, guess who made an extraordinary statement? In the Times it reads, President Trump declared his unswerving loyalty to Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on Tuesday, declaring that the prince's culpability in the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi might never be known. Incredible thing.
Yeah, it is incredible. I mean, as I say, you see, what has simply happened is that he is denying what all the major newspapers say it really happened. And not only the major newspapers, but like you say, the CIA and American diplomats, and on and on and on and on. So it's going to be a defeat for Saudi Arabia and for Trump.
But what can be done? I mean, Trump evidently is saying, well, that's it. It is what it is. I'm not going to do a darn thing about this.
All right. Now, what the Times says, when they quote people and so on, is that the Democrats and a big piece of the Republicans in Congress are convinced that the Saudis killed him, and they are now beginning to agitate. Now, over the last few months, there have been a number of votes where, substantial numbers of Congress people, denounced Saudi Arabia or called for America to stop arming it, and so on and so forth. When the Democrats take over, when they're actually the new Congress is seated in January, one of the very first things that they're going to do, and one of the most popular things that they're going to do, is call upon the American government to stop arming Saudi Arabia. Now, it's already reached a point where the American government officially says that they're no longer air fueling Saudi jets. Now, I haven't heard anybody in any of the newspapers saying that they're lying. So it's already been a substantial cut in the ability of the Saudis to wage that war, and it's going to be harder and harder for them to get away with it. And I think the Secretary of State, I forget his name, but the Secretary of State called upon the Saudis and the
Pompeo.
Yeah, Pompeo called upon the Saudis to start negotiating peace with the Houthi. So, we're at now what I'm talking about you and me and, the anti-Saudi American alliance people, what we're doing, and, I'm literally proposing this right now, is that we ought to send an email to every member of Congress. When I say member of Congress, I mean member of the new Congress, the one that's coming up in January. Well, both the present Congress and the new one, saying, hey, there's all, I'm paraphrasing, hey, everybody is outraged at the murder, and what are you going to, we favor a complete cut-off of American weapons sales and the complete pull-out of American jets from, like I say, air fueling the Saudis.
Right, and where do you stand on this issue?
Where do you stand on it? Right, and please reply to us and to reply to your what do you call the guy? The voters in your district, your state.
I want to switch a little bit. I just want to talk about Palestinian issues with this, because you were one of the first to say you've been a Palestinian solidarity activist for decades, and you were one of the first to say we ought to be talking about Saudi Arabia for the sake of the Palestinians. Is that right?
All right. What Trump has been trying to do is get the Saudis to intervene with the Palestinians and tell them to make peace with the Israelis, and so that that discredits the idea of the Saudis, this prince who's a murderer, that he should be twisting the arm of the Palestinians. So now, I just read today, and I forget whether it was in the Times or the Wall Street Journal, the Israelis are not on the same page as Trump with the Saudi Arabians. They know that the Saudis killed this guy, and they don't want to defend the Saudis. It can only hurt them. discredit them by doing it. So now let's since you brought up the Palestinians in this thing, a new scene has taken place in the American media. For some, maybe a year or so, there have been articles, one here, one there, one here, one there, talking about the fact that American Jews are not have a lot of differences with Israel. Now, what has happened since the murder in Pittsburgh is that the newspapers are now discussing out loud. They're summing up their own articles and saying, "Hey, a big change has taken place in the relationship between American Jews and Israel." Now, for example, when the murder took place in Pittsburgh, the New York Times had an article, and let me just dig it out while I'm talking to you. All right, here's the October 30th New York Times. It's an article. It's about the synagogue shooting, and the article is called "Massacre Exposes Fractures in Jewish Solidarity in Israel and America," and it's a full page, more than a full page article about the differences. Now, the thing that gave them the so to speak, the journalistic excuse to write is this. Now I'm quoting the New York Times. Now this article, quote, let me just adjust my eyes here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm far-seeing, but I'm blind. You know that. Okay. This is a quote from the New York Times, October 30th. Quote, Israel's chief rabbi took pains to avoid the word synagogue to describe the scene of the crime because it is not Orthodox but conservative and is rejected by the religious authorities who determine the Jewish state's definition of Jewishness.
Pretty pathetic.
Yeah, all right. Now, you see, they couldn't, as serious journalists who by themselves, most of the journalists who write from the New York Times are liberal, I don't agree with them on everything, but, they're certainly on the left wing of the Democratic Party. So the article goes on and says, quote, Jews from liberal American denominations feel increasingly alienated from Israel's religious life. And then it goes on, another quote, politically liberal American Jews have been repelled by Mr. Trump's solid support for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and by Mr. Netanyahu's effusive embrace of Mr. Trump and his granting of a wish list worth of political gifts. These include scrapping the Iran nuclear agreement, repeatedly punishing the Palestinians, and recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Now, here we're finding another step in this alienation. The bulk of American Jews, whether they're atheists, Orthodox, Reform Jews, whatever, the bulk of them are Democrats, and they supported Obama's negotiations with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're saying to themselves, "Hey, wait a minute, what's going on here?" Uh, Trump is broke with this agreement, which the bulk of American Jews supported. So they're angry at Trump, and they're angry at the Israelis, Netanyahu, because he gets along with Trump, and and is also very anti-Iranian. Now, don't misunderstand me. Iran is no wonderful place, but the fact of the matter is that the treaty was a step away from Iran having, developing an atomic bomb, and there's no particular reason for you or I or anybody well intended to oppose the treaty. So what you got now is a major difference of American Jews with the Israeli government on a central issue of Israeli foreign policy, namely its hatred of Iran.
And then there's the whole business of Trump's dog whistles to the Nazi right, and his encouragement for every kind of hate, and then you get this guy who commits the worst massacre of Jews in U.S. history.
All right, now let me back away. Excuse me. Let me back away a little bit from you. When you say Trump plays around with anti-Semitism, I assume what you're focusing on is Charlottesville, where he talks about the nice people on both sides. And the nice people on one side were the Nazis and the whites, civil, what can you call them? Robert E. Lee fans, Civil War. The South lost.
Right.
Now, what I rise to Trump's defense. Trump wasn't he didn't mean that the Nazis were nice people. He meant that the white supremacists were nice people, because those white supremacists in the South are now Republicans. So that's what he meant by nice people, not the Nazis. You can't find him saying the Nazis are nice.
Yeah, but he talks about the Soros baloney and all kinds of other white nationalist.
All right, now you see that's the thing. Now, again, rising to his defense, you see, what he was denouncing Soros for was he believes that Soros is supporting the Central American migrants who are heading for the American border. Now he was. I mean, let me put it this way: he supports a lot of the groups that support them. He didn't fund them or anything like that. But by focusing on Soros, you see, when you're dealing with Trump, you have to bear in mind that he's an idiot. He does things back asswards, if you know what I mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Denouncing Soros, what's happening in America today and in the world today is that a lot of people are focusing on Soros as the bad guy. He's a liberal, a Jew, etc. But some of them are opposed to him because he's an anti-Semite, and others are opposed to him because he is a liberal. Now, bear in mind, Soros is anti-Zionist. He's one of the few major funders of the Democratic Party who makes a big thing of saying, "I am not a Zionist." Now, let me go into this. Stay on that, sort of on that topic for a minute. The biggest election donor in American history is Sheldon Adelson. Now, if your listeners don't know who he is, Sheldon Adelson is an Israeli who owns a gambling casino in, Reno or Las Vegas?
Well, Las Vegas and Macau, all sorts of places.
Oh, okay, but okay. Now, in the 1912 election, he was the biggest donor to anybody. He donated $100 million, and that made him the biggest election donor in American history. Now, since then, he's given a lot of money. I don't know if he gave another $100 million this year, but $80 million is not small change. I mean, he certainly gave $80 million, maybe $100 million, but he remains, because he's a big donor for 1912, 1914, 1960.
Oh, okay. We're getting into too many details. But what is your point about Adelson? Are you saying Trump likes one of his best friends is Jewish? That means he's not doing this?
Look, Trump's daughter converted to Judaism, and his grandchildren are Orthodox Jews.
Yeah.
Now, so it's hard to say that Trump is an anti-Semite when he goes, one of his major Middle Eastern diplomats is his Orthodox Jewish son-in-law.
Well, all right, he's not on the level of a Hitler who would not stay in the same room as a Jew. All right, but certainly his other associations, that guy from Hungary who wore this fascist medal around his neck. No, I don't mean the head of it. I'm talking about an actual Trump advisor. I'm not remembering his name, but he was pushed out last year sometime. I mean, his friends with Breitbart. I mean, all this ultra-right people who don't have problems. They don't have problems with Nazis. These ultra-right people.
No. Look, like for example, the Hungarian prime minister. I guess he must be Orban. He's not a Nazi. I mean, he's right-wing. But and talks about we have to build up Christian values, but he's not a Nazi. What you see, you have to be careful. If you accuse Orban of being a right winger, that's one thing. But if you accuse him of being a Nazi and he's not a Nazi, then somebody.
I'm not talking about Nora. I'm talking about Sebastian Gorka, who wore this thing that his father gave him. It was linked to this Vitezi Rend group that actually worked with the Hungarian Nazis.
All right, but does Trump know that?
Of course, it was.
No.
It was in the press the whole time. The Jewish Forward screamed about it. They were the Forward was the folks who made a campaign about it.
All right, but when he supported the guy, you see, the thing with Trump is that he does stupid things, and then when somebody catches him and says, "Hey, this guy is playing around with the Nazis, Hungarian Nazis," Trump doesn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." But you simply cannot say that Trump is an anti-Semite because he's playing around with these screwballs. He's playing around with screwballs. I mean, that's what he's doing.
And you're saying that the hate against all kind of minorities that comes out of the White House has nothing to do with the atmosphere that created the path for this actual Nazi in Pittsburgh to kill Jews.
I'm saying no. That's exactly it. In other words, the Nazi the guy who killed the Jews in Pittsburgh, you can't show. He's not saying I'm a friend of Trump. Trump's my hero or anything like that. It's just accusing Trump of something that he isn't, when you can accuse him legitimately of stuff that he is. Mm-hmm. In other words, his raging hatred of immigrants, yelling and screaming about these people from Central America who are trying to sell dope, and and the Mexicans who are coming to America to commit murder and all that stuff. That he said, leave it go at that. Let me put it this way: I have learned from practical experience in debating people and in writing material. I am very exact. I don't accuse somebody of something by extension.
Mm-hmm.
Trump, because the way I look at it is, my opponents are going to read my book and they're going to say, aha, look at this on page 492. He says that. Oh, man, the whole book is junk. In other words, if you can't literally prove something, then, don't do it. Now, as I say, talking about Charlottesville, in that case, I don't mean, I'm not defending him. I mean, he was defending white Confederate supremacists, but that's who we meant by the nice people on both sides.
Okay, we went through that. Let's conclude by talking about a group I think you know very well, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. They have gotten a new prominence, maybe even respectability, after Pittsburgh. And, people who don't know better, I think, in the media rush to them, the defender of the Jews. And just last week, I believe, there was a fundraiser in Bridgeport, Connecticut for the ADL. And Trevor Noah, who was a big TV guy, was supposed to be there. Then he got sick, and the substitute was Whoopi Goldberg. So these two very prominent, Hollywood media types were willing to associate with the ADL. What could you tell us about the ADL?
Well, the ADL is a down-the-line Zionist, outfit. Their specialty one of their specialties happens to be focusing on anti-Semitism, and what they're really one of the most obnoxious things that they do is they talk about, yes, anti-Semitism is growing in the United States while it's all over the college campuses. Now, what they mean by it's all over the college campuses is they mean that there are all kinds of anti-Zionist groups on the college campuses these days. And what they don't usually admit is, not only are there anti-Zionists, but a lot of the anti-Zionists are Jews,
Mm-hmm.
And, they got this line, Jews who are pro-Palestinian are self-hating Jews. Now, I've made a joke out of it, the Zionists accuse me of being a self-hating Jew, and the reality is that my 32,894,000 ex-girlfriends all insist that Lenni Brenner is definitely not a self-hating Jew. Lenni Brenner is in love with himself. The only one he ever loved was himself. Now, I tell you, I don't mean to boast, but that has been one of the most successful jokes in all of human history. I mean, every time I tell it when I'm giving a lecture, and the whole audience bursts out laughing. It makes the whole thing ridiculous. And now, one thing that is very important to emphasize with regards to anti-Semitism in the United States right now, and I emphasize this. Hold on a second, as I'm going through my documentation here to find a particular article.
Well, while you're doing that, we could mention to the listeners that the Jewish establishment didn't miss a heartbeat after the Pittsburgh massacre to claim that BDS was anti-Semitism, and shamelessly bringing this lie up to the public, comparing critics of Israeli abuses and saying they were equivalent to people who say the vilest things about Jews.
All right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. As I say, there's a continuity. The Zionists have to constantly keep insisting that anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism, and but the way to answer that is to point out all of the Jews who have been in the past and are now anti-Zionist, and the fact that a growing number. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay. There's something went bang, and I was just wondering. Anti-Zionist Jews are now all over the place. Now, again, in terms of how the times have changed, there's an article in. Let me find the date here. Okay, here we go. New York Times Book Review, November 18. All right, so that was 2 days ago.
Right.
Okay, it's called Lamentations. It's the front page of the New York Times Book Review, Lamentations, and it's by the review is by Gal Beckerman. Okay, and he goes on, and he says he's talking now about Pittsburgh. Okay, and let me quote. He says he's talking about in this victimhood offered an illusion. For one thing, I'm quoting the New York Times now.
Right.
For one thing, the violence of Pittsburgh is far from the everyday reality of American Jews. They live in a country that has offered them a great deal more love than it ever has hate. We're beyond mere tolerance. A recent Pew poll found that American Jews felt, quote, warmer, end quote, about Jews than any other religious group. There is an accumulated sense of comfort and acceptance that has persisted even with a president whose winks have emboldened thousands of internet trolls and hundreds of white men bearing tiki torches. The positive side of the ledger remains plentiful. And he's absolutely right. The murder in Pittsburgh was, absolutely a murder, and I will dance when and if the guy is sentenced to death, and the murderer is sentenced to death, and he dies. That's fine and dandy, but it is simply not. to talk about the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States is ridiculous. There are 330 million Americans, okay? And the fact of the matter is, a majority now of young American Jews are now marrying Gentiles. Another one of my standard jokes is that nowadays a typical Christian mother prays that her daughter will marry a Jew, because that way her husband will be educated and rich, and so on and so forth.
So you're saying that the fact that Christians are so willing to marry Jews is a sign of lack of anti-Semitism.
I'm saying that anti-Semitism in the United States, you see, one guy killed 11 people. One guy, okay, in a country of 330 million people. So, you have to look at it both ways. Certainly, the murder of the 11 people in Pittsburgh was a murder, and as I say, I want the guy to die for it and his punishment for it. But the fact of the matter is that is not typical of the attitude of Americans towards Jews. This is not. We're not in the Weimar Republic waiting for Hitler to come through the door. Now, understand, what I just quoted was from the New York Times. In other words, the New York Times is saying what Lenni Brenner is saying.
I don't know. Is Lenni Brenner selling out? Well, I want to thank you very much for this interview. Let's do another one soon. And,
all right.
Have a good evening.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.